Welcome back after that short break. Let's now listen to our guest speakers. First, we have Dr. Maurice Mashiwa with a session on international policy perspectives on SDG10 reduced inequalities. Dr. Maurice is the Director, Global Policy Advisory Research and Sustainability Services, Serrano, Africa. He is a practitioner and thought leader in public policy and sustainable development. He brings deep expertise in development policy strategy, knowledge management, and broad-based sustainability transformations for clients across a range of sectors, nonprofit, private sector, academy, and government agencies. He has worked for over a decade on applied knowledge services to support policy action research, advisory, and sustainability programs in civil society organizations, consulted for a presidential task force as a senior program officer, and taught at the graduate school level in a leading international private university with accreditation from both the Commission for University Education in Kenya and Senior College and University Commission of USA. GCPIT is proud to have you with us in this summit. Over to you, Dr. Maurice Mashiwa, for your session on international policy perspectives on SDG10 reduced inequalities.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is you are, connecting in from, and greetings from Nairobi. As you have heard, my name is Maurice, and I'm engaged on issues of policy, research, advisory, and sustainability. And for the next few minutes, I have a responsibility of discussing a few things with regard to the question of SDG number 10, the sub-component of global policy, research, and advisory issues that are relevant to SMEs. So upfront, and the presentation that has just ended from Dr. Malik, she provided excellent data, which indicates the global status of the problem of inequality. Andrew Jackson makes a compelling case that if you are to measure the health of a society, let us not look at the apex, let us look at the bottom. So if you link this to data, as we are going to see in a couple of minutes, what is happening at the bottom of our societies, in whichever community you look at. In the heart of California, there is poverty. In the heart of Los Angeles, in the heart of Texas, in the heart of Nairobi. So inequality is an issue that, straddles across, all societies. So the question is, what is it we ought to focus on? Why is this goal 10 so important as to demand our attention? So it would appear that nearly everywhere, a lot of people are struggling with the problem of power imbalance, social inequality, economic inequality, environmental and climate-related challenges. Those challenges collectively only but deepen inequality. So widening stratification of all manner of issues, not just class, economic, income inequality, all those are perhaps a defining, challenge that we are confronted with, during our times. So if you look at the targets, of SDG10, which are known to all of us, question is, what have small and medium enterprises got to do with this? If you're to discuss the opportunity that small and medium enterprises have to help address inequality, out of all these things, whether it is, questions around migration, whether it is questions around improving, and regulating global financial markets, where is the place of an SME operating out of Abuja, Nigeria, or out of Kigali, Rwanda, or out of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, or out of a small village in the heart of, Geneva, to help, deal with these issues? So that is, a major challenge that we are confronted with. So a lot of, thinkers have engaged seriously. There's very robust, material that, exists, to help us understand, what this, competing issues around inequality. So from Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize winner in his compelling book, Inequality Re-Examined, to John Rawls, who wrote excellent work way back in 1971, to another Nobel Prize winner, Joe Stiglitz, has two compelling, books on this issue of inequality, to the seminar one, the classic that Professor, Thomas Piketty, wrote the other day, 2015, to, the other interesting, scholar in geography, Richard Pitt, the question of the geography of power, the problem of knowledge, centers of, knowledge, think tanks, Ivy League universities, and the implications with the problem of inequality to, another Nobel Prize winner, Wole Soyinka, in his 2005 publication, after he gave the 204 BBC Read lectures on the climate of fear, to Frank Fukuyama, the professor at Stanford, on his work on poverty, inequality, and democracy. So implications of these issues with regard to our long-term expectations. So I will not go into definition or issues of what inequality is. I will jump straight, causes, all this has been discussed. But I think one major issue is the problem of neglect. That in some societies, it's not that policies don't exist. Policies rather exist. There's legislation. But that some of these, legislations and policies are inefficiently executed or selectively executed, and that significantly voices of private sector, especially MSMEs, are hardly heard at the table. So as they say, if you're not at the table discussing, solutions, people could be discussing, on how to turn you into, into a meal yourself. So here is a question. Why should we focus on SMEs in the context of SDGs and now discuss, questions of inequality? Granted, globally, SMEs are at the heart of addressing development challenges. So those solutions, as we say in business, if you're not selling, some solution or product, you'll be sold yourself. So from the case of, of our country, Kenya, SMEs represent 98% of all businesses that operate, and that they account for about 80% of Kenya's working population. So if we dealt with that data alone, if a large majority of SMEs collapsed, then what is the implication, in the larger economy? SMEs also are very important in transitioning, but also fostering, income equality, because, it is SMEs that create new job opportunities. Government hardly, employs, takes in, young people from universities. So plays an important role. SMEs also contribute a significant portion, to national GDPs across, the continent, globally, India. SMEs play, a huge portion, across the US. I was looking at the data the other day. SMEs account for nearly 70% of all new job opportunities created, in that economy. So question is, how successful, we can create SMEs, how successful they have been before. We are going to see one slide here, 15 leading, billionaires. So, Dr. Malik already gave us the data of the 1%. Now, 0.01% of that 1% is about 15 corporations that account for nearly, 45% of all global wealth. So these SMEs, over time, they grow to be, to become large, corporations that then make a significant case about what we are doing. Yesterday, I attended an interesting, lecture where UNAIDS Executive Director, good old Winnie Byanyima, was making a very strong case on the problem of inequality with regard to COVID-19. Now we are going to see, in a minute, what the issues are. In fact, now with COVAX, COVAX was created to help address questions around the, pandemic inequality, distribution of vaccines. There are countries that, because of debt issues, sovereign debt challenges, fiscal policy, constricted fiscal policy, space, they are not able to even raise resources to buy vaccines, to even place, orders with the vaccine manufacturing, firms. So we now begin to see, this being COVID-19 being an inequality virus. And you'll see the data provided here, that the gap is 1.4 trillion, dollars, which accounts for increase in wealth of 9 out of 11 sub-Saharan Africa dollar billionaires. So in a record of under 18 months, sub-Saharan Africa's leading billionaires have done what? Increased their wealth by about $1.4 trillion. What is the implication of that? Then when you come to, the percentage, of growth, during this pandemic, some have grown 14 times, especially on this continent. Then you jump to about 14.44 trillion, dollars. They increase, money that the richest top tier, would, if they supported that in terms of tax. So then one has to ask, what is the implication of inequality with regard to this virus? And you don't have to even talk about job opportunities that have been lost. For the case of Uganda, for example, one CEO earns what one would earn, what an ordinary mid-level, manager would earn in 9 months, in 1 month salary. So major questions. On this page here, you see the leading top 15 US billionaires, and you see, so I will not focus so much on the names, but the firms they run. So from Amazon to SpaceX and Tesla to Microsoft to Facebook to Oracle to Google to the global retail giant Walmart, to Bloomberg media outlet to Nike. So if you look at all this, and that this growth, this change in wealth, for the case of Elon Musk's space, Tesla, the jump is 541.7 percent. And this is from a report which was produced last week by IPS, Institute of Policy Studies, out of Washington. So question is, for us who are engaged, on these issues of sustainability, discussing the subcomponent of inequality, where is breeding space for, small businesses to, to grow, to supply these major corporations? Is there such an opportunity? If so, what is the implication? How can we build small and medium, entities, out of little, Mombasa, for example, or Kisumu or Kampala, or Luanda, Angola, and supply Walmart, in New York? So one has to ask, what is the implication? On one hand, inequality is a major challenge that requires, critical policy thinking and, serious engagement, but also offers those who are in business, to think about how do we help reduce these challenges locally. So major issue. So I don't have to go to, this data from IMF on how, COVID-19 has affected our world economy, and that is running from 1900 through to 2020. You see, the slums, the recessions and all that, during World War, and now, 2010, of course, 2008, 2010, and now because of COVID, the global economy was projected to have tanked by about 3.9%. This is from the African Development Bank, recession and implications, on recovery. So these recessions, of course, among other things, is created a new breed. For the case of Africa, it is projected that between 28 to 49 million people have joined, what is now described as the new poor. Now, this is on the question of goal 10 as a subcomponent on migration. So if you look at, the flows, this data from 2 years ago from IOM, you see about 258 million people, have been moving, from their countries of origin, to another. Out of that number, about 2.5 million shillings are irregular migrants. This data obviously I think has changed because it is from 2 years ago. Now, questions that regard, global migration, challenges around governance, challenges around, factors that induce, folks to move from, where they are born and bred, questions around conflicts and, the implications with regard to inequality, Eastern Congo, what is happening now in the Tigray region, Sudan, and other parts, down in Mozambique, Cabo Delgado, and implications, that has. Then now we come to the subcomponent of the real issues, the challenges on the quality of growth and sustainability. So 5 main issues, questions around funding. So SMEs have major challenges around accessing affordable, blended financing, both from public but also private sources. But also questions around knowledge and skills, how they can be strategic, can align, their training for purposes of sustainability, to questions around insights, people duplicate, organizations duplicate. Why? Because of little, if any, investment on what? On research and development. So because of low investments, in this, that is why a large chunk of SMEs depend on major management consulting firms, McKinsey's and, Boston Consultings of this world, KPMG, Deloitte and the like, local universities hardly put sufficient resources into what? Doing serious, tailor-made, SME type of excellence, research centers that can support, and progressively help, build the knowledge base and skills, for SMEs to grow. Locally contextualized, but tapping from the global enterprise of knowledge that exists. To questions around now, the new normal because of COVID, problems around competition, regulation, policy, taxation, all those issues speak significantly to the environment of doing business. We read, not too long ago, it's under 2 weeks, World Bank discontinued, their ease of doing business, report, the index. Why? Because of malpractices from 2018, 2020 reports. Now, question is, would have we been relying on erroneous data on how countries have, been, doing what they have been doing in terms of improving taxation policies and legislation to ease, the ease of doing business? To problems on harnessing technology because of rapid changes, local, revenue issues, and that now because of technology, we have this major issue of the global, digital divide, that some people like us, are converging online globally, and there are people who have no clue. One, they have no access to electricity. That in itself is a major challenge of inequality. And they have no, smartphone, and that we somehow expect them to then, plug into this type of conversation and, uh, pick one or two important, things that can benefit them. So in terms of the real issues that we should be focusing on around global policy, advisory, and research, issues, this slide, I think, summarizes everything that we need to do. Doing more serious work in terms of policy, work around access to finance, and how we can tap with different government agencies, parastatals, but also private sector players in, addressing financing issues for SMEs. Second is what we do about this new normal, survival mechanisms around post-COVID-19, building back better, recovery issues, that SMEs ought, to support us deal with. The other area is what we could do around skills and entrepreneurial culture development, especially for young people in graduate school, people are, who are starting out as, entrepreneurs. What could we do to support them, so that the skills question becomes important, to build courage, to operate, out in the marketplace. Then, of course, focusing on the subcomponent of export. SMEs, if they got good support on skills and knowledge and, finance, could produce to support the global market. Produce in Nairobi, supply, get goods into Amazon. So, very important issue on that. So the internationalization, which is why I'm talking about putting together a center for SME research and competitiveness excellence, something we could pick up, to another level. Then obviously that speaks to innovation and research, creating new markets because of this online space. And then, of course, dealing with the last component on doing more work around supporting women and youth in business. I think if we focused on this, questions around building back better, then would find, sense in how we integrate and work with the SMEs for that purpose. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maurice, for that very informative session. And thank you so much for joining us today. Since